Good morning, everybody. My name is Brad Ack. I lead an organization dedicated to creating a new agenda for ocean and climate action. And we need a new agenda because the current agenda is failing. We have to face some hard realities as we look ahead and try to preserve this amazing planet that we live on and that we're get so many gifts from. We have to, if we're going to tackle the problem, we have to accept just how deep the problem is and how the current agenda is not working. We just heard from the previous panel, there's a lot of new ideas percolating around different parts of an additional agenda. And I want to talk about some of those in detail. But first, I want to substantiate my point that the agenda isn't working. I've spent my entire career, which is a long time now, more than I care to admit, trying to preserve the natural world. And basically, we have not succeeded. Every particular system that I've worked on, we've seen deteriorate. All of the indications of biological diversity, of ecological function, of abundance on the planet are all going in the wrong direction. So we have to do something different than what we're doing. Continuing to try the same thing over and over with no results is madness. So let me talk a little bit about why the ocean is so important and why the ocean crisis and the climate crisis are intertwined. The ocean has essentially shielded humanity from the worst effects of climate change to date. It's done that in two big ways. First, it has absorbed the lion's share, 93% of all of the excess heat that we're trapping on the planet. And it has done so at great cost, and the heat is enormous. So every year now, we're trapping about 14 zettajoules of heat, excess heat that otherwise would have been reflected back into space. And a zettajoule is a joule basic unit of energy followed by 23 zeros. It's an enormous amount of heat. It's the equivalent going into the ocean of 7 atomic bombs of heat energy into the ocean every second. Every second of every minute, every hour, every day, that's how much heat we're driving into the ocean. And that's why we see the unraveling of Earth systems, like Arctic sea ice, as an example. The title of this conference is Bye. We're saying goodbye to things that we care about because of this massive amount of heat that we're trapping on the planet. That heat will continue to be trapped until such time as atmospheric CO2 goes down, and that concentrations of atmospheric CO2 go down. And we're not on a path to do that. We're on a path to keep those concentrations rising. The goal of net zero by 2050, I'm sure many of you have heard that goal, maybe all of you. How many of you think that that's a better place than we are today? Good, I didn't hear anybody say yes. It's a worse place, right? Net zero by 2050 implies a continuing pollution of carbon into the environment, into the atmosphere, a higher concentration in the atmosphere, more heat trapped on the planet, more effect on the oceans. The second big effect of climate disruption is that an enormous amount of our CO2 pollution is going into the ocean and causing ocean acidification. So these two big effects are unraveling ocean systems as we know them, and they will not turn off, full stop, until we bring atmospheric CO2 down. So the current climate agenda is to reduce emissions. Critical. We have to do that. We have to zero them out, but it's no longer enough. We have to add 2 additional components, 2 R's to make this easy. Remove and repair. So the new climate agenda has 3 R's: reduce, remove, repair. Reduce is what we're working on. How do we get carbon out of our lifestyle, out of our economy, our buildings, our food, our energy, our transportation? We need 1,000 shots on goal, every possible application of innovation and technology to do that. The ocean has an enormous role to play. It can provide zero carbon food, it can provide zero carbon transportation, and it can provide zero carbon energy. But we have to get after it in a big way. That's reduce. That's what the world's working on. Remove is pollution cleanup. We have to clean up a massive amount of CO2 pollution that's in the atmosphere and in the upper layer of the ocean, where it will persist for a very long time if we don't clean it up, and it will continue to do damage. So even if we were to stop emitting tomorrow, the damage would continue for 1,000 years or more, just because of the lifetime of CO2 in the atmosphere. So we have to remove. You heard mention of two companies, Ebb Carbon and Running Tide, that Transition Labs is working with. They are carbon removal companies. We need thousands of carbon removal companies. We need a new innovation sector in carbon removal. We need a new giant economy in carbon removal, because we have to remove somewhere between 100 and 1,000 gigatons of carbon by the end of this century just to have a chance of that 1.5 target. And that is a lot of carbon. If we want to actually restore our climate and restore the planet, we're going to have to do much better, and we're going to have to clean up the entire mess, right? Just like we learned in kindergarten, clean up your mess. We've got to clean up this giant mess that we have created in the atmosphere that's trapping all of this heat, and we have to do it fast. And it's going to take innovation, and I love the leadership that Iceland is showing in creating spaces for that innovation to happen, and that research and development and testing, and ultimately scaling. The third R is repair. It won't be enough to slowly reduce carbon emissions and clean up carbon if we lose the patient, if we keep saying goodbye to glaciers, if we say goodbye to sea ice, to the permafrost, to the Greenland ice sheet. We won't be able to live well on the planet, certainly not 9 billion of us. So there are critical parts of the global system, many of which are in the marine environment, that are moving faster and tipping at a faster rate than the global average. The name of this conference is an exact example. The cryosphere, the glaciers on our planet, are one of the things that are disappearing fastest. Sea ice, which is the global refrigerator, if you will. It keeps the planet weather system stable. Its loss is disrupting weather across the entire planet. Many of you probably know that the extent of Arctic sea ice affects the monsoons in India, which are responsible for feeding hundreds of millions of people, just as an example. So these critical systems, they're like the vital organs of our body. We won't live well if we don't keep the vital organs alive. And so marine repair is all about interventions to keep the critical parts of the system alive. How can we slow down the loss of sea ice, the loss of glaciers? How can we slow down the thawing of the permafrost, which threatens to release enormous greenhouse gas? How can we slow the rate of melt of the Greenland ice sheet, which is affecting the North Atlantic current? These are the questions of the future. These are the questions that people will be wrestling with for the next century on this planet. It's going to require a radically different approach. The current approach we have is incremental, and the change is exponential. So we're trying to beat an exponential problem with incremental action, and that is a recipe for failure. So we have to apply what we have at our disposal. The good news is we have more knowledge, more technology, more tools than we've ever had in the history of humanity, whether it be AI, robotics, nanotechnology, synthetic biology, and many more. These are the kinds of tools that we're going to have to bring to these really large problems. And places like Iceland and the innovation ecosystem that you're building here are perfect places to advance these kinds of, the development of these technologies. We have to test everything. We have to try everything. If you were gravely ill and you went to the doctor and they said, well, you know, I've just got this experimental medicine, I don't know, but if you don't take it, you know, the likelihood is you're going to die, you would likely take it. But if you don't know you're that sick, you definitely aren't going to take it, right? Why would you take a potentially unknown path if you thought you were healthy? Well, we're not healthy. This is like emergency medicine for the planet. We can do it. And Iceland is really well poised to be a leader in reducing, removing, and repairing the environment. And we look forward to working with all of you to advance that agenda. Thank you.